Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA D10 Nano project, more specifically in this instance the work-in-progress Sega Saturn Core, which has seen a lot of updates. We just recently got another one over the weekend, which is focused entirely on getting some of the sound issues fixed and some more cycle accuracy, bringing this in line, and if not even better than MedDefend, which is what I would say would be the leading Sega Saturn emulator at this point in time, and you know you love to get updates. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But first up, a game we haven't tested yet on the channel, and last time I looked at in my spare time had a lot of problems, is going to be Black Dawn. If you can't tell already, it's a helicopter combat game utilizing both 3D and 2D elements and giving you a really nice look at the overall 3D capabilities of Sega Saturn, mixing it in with those large sprites we see as well. This is definitely not one of the Sega Saturn's best games, but it is one of the most improved games on most recent cores, and some people have been asking to see tests of this one, so I figured why not. And big thanks to Andy D for helping out with this as well, because I was on vacation over the weekend and I was only reading the updates. But again, the core is getting so much better. Every single iteration of it is improving on certain aspects of different functionality, whether it be sound accuracy or better performance in games, and Black Dawn definitely is one that last time I played it, I believe it froze and had a lot of graphical corruption. You will see that the frame rate is keeping up pace, and you can definitely get a little motion sick when you play this one. You can crank that helicopter left and right and really get it into a spin, but otherwise it's a fun example of a 3D Sega Saturn game, and one that is working a lot better on the core. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you remember this one from back in the day. I remember it existing. I think I saw it on store shelves, but it's not anything I ever picked up in the Sega Saturn's lifespan. But as far as the core performance on the most recent version is concerned, it's another great game to play. It's going to have perfect visuals, great audio, the controls are going to be exactly what you expect. They do take a minute to get used to because you are flying around in a helicopter, but if there is anything wrong with this one, it's not anything I can see, and that is how the core is shaping up. I get to say that more and more now. I can't tell any difference between this and real hardware. Just be aware that this has not yet been merged into Update All, so like the other previews I've shown you, you're going to have to manually install this off the MiSTer Discord test builds channel. You can get the single or dual RAM version, but at this point in time there really is no delineating factor between one or the other. And I love how these hostages run into this tent. Somehow that tent in the middle of a battlefield is 100% safe. I don't understand the logic behind it, but let's just go with it. We've rescued them, and Black Dawn is another game that seems to be doing incredibly well on the core. Now let's move over to The Legend of Oasis, a game that you've all been asking me to retest because I don't think I've covered this one in over a year. And last time I was playing around with it a couple months ago in my spare time, definitely had some audio issues, which seem to all have been resolved as of these most current cores. And this is just the Sega Saturn doing what it does best, being an absolute powerhouse of a 32-bit 2D console. It's got amazing graphics, large sprites, a really nice soundtrack, really everything you want out of a game if you didn't want to play 3D back in the day. And this has gone through multiple versions as well. I remember when this had graphical corruption and would basically freeze pretty much all of the time, and that is how impressive these current cores really are. I haven't been able to freeze the Sega Saturn core in any of my testing for probably a month or so now. Every single game that I know works is just loaded up and played, like I popped it in my real Sega Saturn as a disc or loaded it up into my Saru flash cart, and that is exactly what we want to see. Just being able to sit down and start playing Sega Saturn games like you were playing real Sega Saturn hardware. If you've never played The Legend of Oasis before, I can't recommend it enough. It is a very fun kind of action platform RPG game that really pushes the Sega Saturn 2D to its absolute limit, showing you just how good of a 2D console it was. And everything on the screen looks spectacular, from the shadows on all of the sprites to the backgrounds to the heads-up display to the audio. This is another title where if it's doing anything other than what real hardware would do, I do not think 99% of anybody would be able to tell. But if this is your favorite game and you notice something, leave me a comment down below. And I'm going to get to the accuracy and sound sample in just a moment. It isn't the most exciting footage, but it is a very fundamental uptick for the core's performance. But The Legend of Oasis is a ton of fun, and here on the core today, it just seems to be like real Sega Saturn hardware. It's fast, it's fun, and again, it's a game that I feel like most people probably haven't played. So if you check this one out, leave me a comment down below and you tell me. And if you've never played it before, take this recommendation. Definitely give it a shot. You can play it on the Sega Saturn Core. I checked with a few people. They've played it from start to finish and seen the credits scroll, so you should be 100% fine just sitting down and enjoying this without really even thinking you're on MiSTer FPGA. Now let's move over to Crow NSF. This is a music player and a test bed, and it's definitely had some changes because it never used to really work very well on the Core. Go ahead and listen to the sound sample first, and I'll come back and explain why this is important. But enjoy. So it's not so much about the sound that you just heard, it's the fact that the sound actually works and Crow NSF actually loads on the Core, because this used to freeze, and this is in conjunction with some tests done, and you'll see there all green passes all the way down the line. Before this Core, most of those would be red, it would function but it wouldn't pass the test, and honestly, even from what I can understand, MedDefend can't get all green passes. And that's not to say MedDefend isn't an amazing emulator. Anytime I needed to use software emulation for Saturn, it was my go-to, and I can't recommend it enough. I don't want anyone taking away that I'm trying to say one thing is better than the other. I'm just saying that the MiSTer FPGA Sega Saturn Core is passing all those tests, Crow NSF loads, and that really isn't the most exciting thing in the world from a gameplay perspective, but from an accuracy perspective, that means this Core is doing the same thing that real Sega Saturn hardware would do if you tested it. Real Sega Saturn hardware, if functioning correctly, will pass all the tests, as will this. Now let's move over to Linkle Liver Story, a very weird title and a very fun game. You can definitely tell a theme here, some isometric 2D games for this test, and this is another one where the visuals and the music, last time we took a look at it, had some issues, especially in the music and sound effects side. There was a lot of popping and clipping in the channels, and some things was just come out garbled. Now today, that's completely fixed as well, and that's basically the trend. A lot of these updates have been focusing on some of the sound, getting the sound effects and the music working a little bit better, and making sure everything is balanced out correctly. And if I didn't tell you this was MiSTer FPGA footage and you were familiar with the game, I still don't think anyone would actually be able to tell I wasn't just capturing on real Sega Saturn hardware, outside of the fact that the video signal is even cleaner because we're capturing in via HDMI, and that's going to be the other big benefit. Yes, Sega Saturn has incredible RGB out, the best of any console in my opinion ever made, but you really still can't get HDMI out of it without a lot of trouble, and that's the great thing about these cores. Not only do they preserve the hardware and make it playable to a much larger audience, but they also give you features that the original hardware really can't possibly do, and that is always a great thing to see. And if you've never played this game either, another one I definitely recommend, not one that you hear mentioned much, but it is a fun time. If you kind of like another action RPG, it's going to give you a lot to love. Just don't run into the water there. This game will definitely screw with you when it comes to water. But Linkle Liver Story is another game that you can play on the Core, and I don't understand the title whatsoever. I think maybe liver was supposed to be river, and it was a little bit of a mistranslation because there is a lot of water in the game, but otherwise they called it Linkle Liver Story, the strangest name on Sega Saturn in my opinion, but an awesome game you should check out. Now on to other games that everyone keeps asking for retests of and have seen some improvement in the sound department. Sakura Wars has definitely improved a lot since the last time we talked about it. I went back through some of the old videos, and the last thing I said was the game seems to be running well, it's not freezing, but the sound effects definitely will clip the audio channels, and you might want to turn your headphones down before you actually listen to it. Today, that is completely not the case whatsoever. The game is running, looking, and sounding exactly like you would expect, and I will give you a soundtrack sample in just a moment. But honestly, the Core is progressing to the point where I really can't find anything wrong with the games on test. Yes, there's still some open tickets on GitHub for very minor things, but if you feel like we're kind of getting to the finish line. But go ahead and listen to that soundtrack sample, get some dialogue, and I'll be back just to tell you a little bit more.
に着きましたよ、大神さん。大神さん、ここが帝劇、帝国歌劇団花組の本部、大帝国劇場です。
The music, the sound effects, the dialogue all sound incredible, and I did watch a real Sega Saturn capture of this on YouTube and listened in my studio monitors to hear if I could tell any differences between the Sega Saturn Core and the real hardware, and honestly to my ear they were one-to-one identical, and that's because SRG320 has really been focusing on the sound side of things recently with a lot of his updates, and he even puts in games that should see fixes based on the GitHub commits. So if you're ever wondering what is new in a new core, you can go over to his GitHub or read the commit tickets and basically understand exactly what's been updated. But Sega Saturn really does feel like it is reaching the finish line. It might take 6 cores, it might take 12, it might take 6 months, it might take a year. We do not know, we have to be patient, but for the most part, if you want to play Sega Saturn on MiSTer FPGA today, just go ahead and do it, you're going to have a great time. Sure to that, recommend some new tests down below, and I'll see if I can get to each and every one of them, but we're done. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.